Hello everybody, and Swifer here, and today we are going to be looking at more horror stories. Let's continue. True terrifying horror stories.
I was driving home from work one night around 9 p.m. midweek, so the roads were quiet. As I was driving downhill, I heard a sound that was like a jet engine roaring behind me. The next thing I know, a car goes flying past me going twice the speed limit. It looked like a fairly old and crappy car, and the car started to get the speed wobbles. Then one of the tires came flying off and rolled at high speeds downhill while the car spun out and crashed. I stopped my car to make sure whoever was inside was okay. A guy got out of the car and looked over at me, and then started moving extremely quickly towards me. I don't know why, but I hit my internal locks on the car, which was fortunate, because no more than 2 seconds later, the guy started grabbing at the driver's side door and smashing on my windscreen with his fists trying to get in. I'll never forget the look he had in his eyes. I put my foot down on the accelerator and drove off back home. I decided to swap cars once I got home and drove back to see what was going on. I saw 2 fire trucks and about 4 police close to where the incident happened. When I got back to the crash site, the guy was no longer there, so I decided to head home. The next day at work, I was online and bored reading the news when I saw an article that shocked me. The article was about a guy who had been in a police chase for 1 hour, and the police stopped chasing him because it was becoming too dangerous. Turns out the guy was high on meth, had stolen a car an hour's drive away, and had been in a hot pursuit since. After crashing the car, the guy apparently crossed to the other side of the road and hailed the first car that appeared, which was a taxi. He got into the taxi and stole it. In the process, he pushed the driver out of the driver's side door, and the driver got stuck and dragged at speeds. The driver died from the incident. I called the police and had a detective assigned to me. He fingerprint checked my car and got a statement. I had to testify in the Supreme Court as a key witness in a murder trial. The guy got 30 years, and they told me that my testimony was one of the main factors in convicting him. I often think back to that night and wonder if I hadn't locked my doors, would I have been the one who got murdered?
My name is Milo. I'm 14 years old, but this happened about a year ago. One day, I was having a sleepover with my 2 best friends, Ben and Michael, to celebrate Ben's birthday. Ben wanted to go camping and have a bonfire, so we all set up our tents for a fun night. When we set everything up, we talked about the usual teenage boy stuff, sports, cars, and girls. As the night progressed, Ben began to tell us
That was a good story.
About a man from our town who was on the run from the police. He said that the man lurked around in the darkness and kidnapped teenage boys. He grabs you by the legs and drags you through the forest while looking for more kids to prey on, Ben said. We all burst out with laughter at how ridiculous it sounded. Nothing like that would ever happen in our town, right? At least, that's what we thought. We all started to feel sleepy and decided to call it a night. During the middle of the night, I got out of my tent to use the bathroom on one of the trees nearby. But when I was done, I looked back to see a man warming his hands on our fire, and 3 small, dark figures hid behind him, each looking like a starved child. I screamed in fear, waking my friends who freaked out when they saw him. We sprinted out of the forest to warn people about the man, but nobody in town believed us. When it was light outside the next morning, we went back to the forest to collect our gear and go home. Everything was there, but a note was left on the ground. It read, grabs you by the legs and drags you, with a smiley face drawn at the end. We alerted the police and never went back to that forest again.
That was a pretty good story. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I wasn't really creeped out. Let's see the next one.
About 10 years ago when I was 12, I would always go into the nearby woods with my friends for most of the day. One night, we left pretty late. Usually I got home before dark, but today, I knew I wouldn't make it back, and I already knew my parents would be mad at me. We were walking in a group for a few blocks, then a couple of my friends split from us to go to their house. I started to notice that a van kept driving past us. I didn't think anything of it. And then my last friend split to go to her house. I had about 5 to 10 minutes left until mine. Then I see that van again, and it pulled up right beside me and stopped. The driver rolled down the front window. Then she told me that she can't find her son and she's been looking all evening. Then she asked me if I seen him. I looked and I said no. Then she asked me if I wanted to get in her van to help find him. I said no again, and I looked forward. Then she asked me, am I sure? I didn't answer and I started to walk faster. Then all of a sudden, there was some guy in her back seat that said, let's just fucking snatch her. I looked at the van for a split second as the woman looked in the back seat and she sped up to park on the side of the street. I started running through yards. I heard the doors open and shut on the van, but I didn't look back until I got home. Nobody followed me. I told my parents and we called the cops. I never missed curfew after that.
That was a nice story.
I'm scared of the dark, and I have a good reason for it. You might be thinking, so? Almost everyone is scared of the dark because something happened to them. Well, that is true for me too. Here's my story. About 2 years ago, I ran away from home. I don't know just what I was thinking at the time, but I left with no food, no water, no belongings, and no coat. It was a very rainy day, and I sensed that I should either find shelter or I'd be soaking wet. So I decided to walk to my school and stay there for a few hours to dry off, as I was already wet and cold on a rainy day. As I arrived, I laid down my head and quickly fell asleep. And when I woke up, it was pitch black outside, and I could barely make out anything. I didn't have a watch or anything that tells the time, so I assumed it was midnight. At least it stopped raining, I thought. I decided to just go back home, as I wasn't far and I was very hungry that time. As I got up, I stopped. There was something in front of me, under a streetlight, about 50 yards away. It was a man about 6 feet tall, and he was wearing a black coat with a hoodie over his face, so I couldn't see his face. At first, I thought it was my dad who had come to look for me, so I felt relief. But I didn't want to get into trouble, so I hid in a bush nearby and peeked out. The man was standing there and looked around for what it seemed like a half an hour. Then, under the light of the streetlight, he pulled something out of his pocket. I couldn't make it out at first, but then I realized it was a kitchen knife. Then he started to run toward the bushes. No, towards me. Exactly. I grew frightened and sprinted out of the bushes like an arrow. He already knew I was there. I didn't stop running until I got home without ever looking back. So I survived. But to this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I didn't run on that day. Or worse, what would have happened if I didn't wake up at the school? I developed my fear of the dark from this incident. It's so bad that now I have to sleep with a nightlight or the hallway light occasionally. because I'm afraid that the man whom I saw will kill me or kidnap me someday if I don't turn the light on.
Nice story. That was nice.
This fact happened when I was 15 years old. Beginning of last year, 2018, when I finally got to sophomore year here in Brazil. It was an ordinary Friday night. Suddenly I felt a little bit hungry, so I decided to put on some clothes and go to the snack bar. It was barely 10 minutes from my house. I usually pass through the alley to go to the snack bar, but that time everything was so creepy in there. When I was halfway there, it was dark, empty, abnormally cold and gloomy. I felt slightly intimidated, but there was nothing there that could really harm me. So I decided to just go through that alley. Then I thought, nothing's gonna happen. I kept going until I suddenly heard something weird on the other side of the alley. There was a man in there, staring at the walls in hunchback stance, grunting weirdly. And I found that incredibly creepy, but I was nearly at the snack bar, so all I needed was just to get out of that alley. Walk 1 minute more and I finally would get there, instead of making it all the way home with empty hands. Thus, I decided to ignore him and pass through after all. I finally passed through him. He turned to me and stared at me with a creepy smile, which made me walk a little bit faster, trying to avoid him. Then, suddenly, I heard a grunt and quick steps behind me. When I looked back, it was him. We were barely 2 feet away from each other. He had a kitchen knife in his right hand and jumped on me with amazing speed and tried to stab me. I managed to grab both of his arms before he could get me. However, since he was charging at me, he still had more energy to push me back and force me against a wall. I was terrified with all of that. I knew I would die if I didn't fight back. Back then, I was already trained in some martial arts to defend myself, but that I thought I'd never need to use that skill to defend my life until now. So, in a sudden burst of adrenaline, I managed to twist the wrist which he was holding the knife, kicking his stomach and punching him mercilessly in the face several times. In the end, his face was bleeding so much, but his body was ignoring the pain of the blows in his body and only focusing on killing me. Finally, I used a training that I took before to twist both of his wrists and elbows harshly at the same time, forced in 2 different directions, and kicked the backside of his leg, putting him to the ground until ultimately he could drop the knife. It wasn't easy because he was struggling and punching my back and somehow trying to jump on me. But since I had his arm under my grasp, he couldn't do much without breaking himself. I slammed his head in the concrete ground, stunning him, then kept striking his face desperately while kneeling over his arm so he wouldn't be able to react or reach his knife again. And finally, he was out cold, bleeding a lot. My knuckles were full of blood and hurt. So I got up, took his knife, throwing it far away from there, and ran away from him. I finally got to the snack bar, washed my hands in there, and did everything I had to do before going back home. But obviously, I didn't take the same path as I did before. But there were things that got much creepier. That was at the entrance of my apartment, where I heard screams coming from the other side of the street. It was the same crazy man. Now, seeming like he was possessed by a demon, and he was slamming his head on the iron door of my building's entrance. His face was horribly deformed and scarred from our fight. That freaked me out completely. My parents were on a trip and the watchman of our building was on vacation. I wasn't going to fight that man again, so I decided to rush to my girlfriend's house. When I got there, she was home alone. She looked worried because I was looking pale and there were still some marks of the man's blood on my clothes. I explained everything to her, and we called the police to come by my building. And when they arrived, the man was still in the entrance trying to force the doors unsuccessfully. When he saw the police, he attacked them, but got quickly dominated by the cops. They explained that he was probably a crazy psycho in the streets looking for prey to rape, kill or do anything he wanted to the person. So they sent him to a high-security mental asylum for criminals, far away from my house. I feel so lucky that I survived that day, and I'm hoping that I will never see that man again.
Damn. I wish to be friends with that man. Not the psychopath, the one that fought back. I wish to be friends with that man. Cause I'm gonna beat the F out of people too.
When I was 10 or 11, my cousin and aunt visited us. We had fun throughout the day, and my aunt and cousin decided to sleep at my other aunt's house before leaving early in the morning. After such a fun day, I insisted upon sleeping at my aunt's house too, so I could spend more time with everyone. Later that night, we all fell asleep in the guest room, the only room that was available for us. I woke up suddenly at 5 a.m. I heard my mom and other aunt talking, so I was definitely awake. I saw that my cousin and aunt's things weren't there anymore, so I assumed they'd already left. I was about to fall back asleep. I looked at my left and saw someone sleeping beside me. I was about to hug her, thinking it was my 21-year-old girl cousin. But then I saw her face. She wasn't my cousin at all. She was someone I didn't know. But she looked about the age of my cousin. She wore pajamas and a black shirt, and all I could do was stare at her. She started doing strange things, like stretching her legs up and down, and just focusing on the ceiling. It was all so odd. But feeling tired, I eventually drifted off to sleep like nothing had happened. I woke up at 8 a.m., looking at my left, and she was gone. I told everything to my mom and every family member in the house, but no one knew what I had experienced or who the girl was. My dad told me that my third eye was starting to see more, but I didn't really believe that. I'm turning 13 now, and that experience still remains a mystery to me. It never happened to me again, and hopefully it won't.
First, I gotta say, why didn't you immediately go to your parents? Like, bruh.
Hi, my name is Adil, and this is a true story. The police have finished this case, and the man is in prison now. I was 14 at the time this...
Oh my god. We heard the story. We did. But I want to hear it again.
...took place. I was in a school and sitting in a history lesson that was so boring.
If you guys don't want to see it, I'm sorry. I really want to see it, but I can skip. And you guys can just go watch the video, but nah. Let's just watch it.
My friend Noel, who was sitting opposite me, said I could come over on Saturday, as his parents were not going to be there because they were going on a weekend.
Let's just go to the good part.
But said yes anyway. After 30 minutes of watching him not playing and just holding the controller in his hand, I switched off the TV and asked him what was going on. To which he replied, "I need your help." I asked him what he needed my help for. He told me that this man who added him on Facebook was actually stalking him in real life, and as to how he wanted to meet Noel. He warned him that if he told his parents, he would kill them. So Noel, being the stupid idiot, he told him to come at 8 p.m., 5 minutes from now. He was scared, so he asked me to come to this meeting to get rid of him, and that if he had told me at school, I never would have agreed to come. He was right. I felt betrayed that he brought me here under false pretenses. I was also angry at his stupidity of him giving his address away as well. However,
I would never be friends with after this. How dumb are you to give an actual address to a stranger? How dumb are you?
I had no time to argue. I was just glad he told me about this guy. I grabbed my pepper spray and just sat there on the couch. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m. I just sat there hoping he would leave after a little bit. However, then I started to hear scratching and realized he was breaking in with some sort of tool. I quickly ran into the kitchen with Noel, and we heard the door lock get broken, and someone kicked the door in. The lights were on, and we were hiding behind the large fridge. The man, in a deep voice, shouted, "Noel!" We didn't reply, and then he shouted, "Noel, where the heck are you? I'm going to kill you." I had a plan. At this point, I pushed Noel out from behind the fridge. Noel started going back, and the man was walking forward, chuckling. As soon as he came near the distance of the fridge, I shot out and sprayed pepper spray in his eyes. He screamed in pain and then started swinging the screwdriver in his hand. I grabbed the screwdriver and picked up a pan laying there and hit him on the head. He blacked out. He was dressed in a smart suit and was clean-shaven. We called the police and later found out that he was a man who was being monitored because there were several complaints of stalking and threatening behavior. They also found many tools in a bag he left near the door that would dismember a body. Thankfully, this sicko didn't kill anyone. However, I'm now happy that Noel called me because I dread to think what would have happened if I wasn't there. This incident took place in Dubai when I was 10. I used to go to my friend's apartment to play with him at the time of vacation. One day, as usual, I went to his room to play. After playing for a long time, I went to the bathroom. While I was washing my face off and other things suddenly started to fall down. I was surprised. I thought maybe it was because of wind, but when I checked the surroundings, I found out there wasn't any window in the bathroom. I got out and told my friend the incident. He told me that there's a ghost in his room. I freaked out. At first, I didn't believe him. However, then next his mother and father explained the paranormal activities which had taken place there since they moved into that place. His father was making a burrito in the kitchen one day, and suddenly a call came for him. He kept the burrito on the stove and attended the call. After attending the call, when he came back, he was surprised to find out that the burrito was burning down in flames from the stove. But he said he was definitely sure that he hadn't turned on the stove yet. Another day, while his mother was cooking food, suddenly she felt as if someone was choking her by holding her throat from behind, and she fled out of the kitchen with a scream. The same day, while they were sleeping at night, they heard sounds from the bathroom. And when they checked it out, they found all the things, such as bottles of toilet cleaner and other things, had been scattered inside the bathroom. And that story made me suddenly freeze. This was the exact same incident which occurred to me. They had called some group of ghost hunters and did some sort of rituals and found out that 2 people had been murdered by someone. To know if this was true, they went to the flat owner, and he said just the same thing like the ghost hunters and apologized for giving them this room. They moved out the next day after my visit to their house. Well, to this day, I still wonder what would have happened to me if I had stayed there for some more time.